South Asia comprising of 8 countries, namely Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And this is the vast continent, and it is the home of one fifth of the world population, and it is the most densely populated area. And according to the United Nations Environment Program 2003, South Asia is known to be most disaster prone region in the world. And this disaster solely due to the climate change. Now the summary of the climatic trend of South Asia. First is the Bangladesh. In the cases of temperature, there is an increasing trend of about 1 degree centigrade in May and zero point 0.5 degrees centigrade in November from 1985 to 1998. And in the cases of precipitation, in Bangladesh, decadal rain anomalies above the long-term averages since 1960s. So, in the cases of Bangladesh, uh, the warmer months, that is the summer months, gets more warmer, and also the winter, the average temperature of the months of November or December is an increasing trend. In the cases of India, the 0.8668 degrees centigrade increase per centuries with the increasing rate of annual mean temperature, and the warming rate is more pronounced during the post monsoon and winter. Rather, India gets more warmer than the average during the post monsoon period. In the cases of precipitation, the extreme rain events in the northwestern state during the summer monsoon and in most recent decades, and the lowering the number of rainy days along the east coast. It is most common phenomena. Moreover, Bangladesh and India terrifically and adversely affected by the cyclone and super cyclone in each pre-monsoon and post-monsoon. In the cases of Nepal, the average changes in temperature rate is 0.09 degrees centigrade per year in Himalayan area region, and in the Tarai region it is 0.04 degrees centigrade with more in winter. And Nepal, there is no distinct long-term trend in precipitation records for 1948 to 1994. In Pakistan, it also increasing trend of temperature and decreasing trend of the precipitation. Okay, and 10 to 15% decrease in the coastal belt in the cases of rainfall. Okay, so winter precipitation over the last 40 years in Pakistan and is in decreasing trend. Rather, Pakistan face more drought and more water scarcity through the last decades. In the cases of Sri Lanka, uh, 0.01 degrees centigrade increase per year between 1961 to 1990, and and Sri Lanka. Also, there is an increasing trend of precipitation during the February and decreasing trend in the precipitation in June. So, in brief, the period of monsoon and timing of monsoon is hampered since last centuries, and there is an increasing trend of temperature for in the cases of Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, even in the cases of India. Rising temperature in South Asia. In Afghanistan, 0.27 degrees centigrade increase per decades. In Pakistan, 0.17 degrees centigrade increase per decades. In Sri Lanka, 0.17 degrees centigrade increase per decades. In the cases of Nepal, uh, it increased 0.14 degrees centigrade per decades. In India, 0.11 degrees centigrade increases per decades. and in Bangladesh 0.19 degrees centigrade increase per decade. So, temperature of South Asian countries are in increasing trend. Consequence of global warming in South Asia. First one is the melting of Hindu Kush and Himalayan glacier. Second is the impacts on monsoonal climate. Whole South Asia, including Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and Sri Lanka, and their economy is agrarian and solely depend on the natural rainfall, that is monsoonal rainfall, and agriculture is the intensive subsistence farming. So lifestyle, economy, all these things are depend on monsoonal rainfall. So changes or the disruption in monsoonal pattern leads a negative impact, leads a adverse impact in South Asian economy um, and the people's lifestyle. And third one is the changes in sea level. Glacial melting is very important because much of the world drinking water is stored in ice. Only 3% of the earth water as a fresh water, and 2% in ice, and 1% in fresh groundwater. So 2% plays a very important role in what Earth's terrestrial water budget. Here a list has been presented to the Indian glacier, rather Himalayan glacier, and their retreatment rate within the particular period. The Toirukonath glacier of Himachal Pradesh retreated almost 400 meter since 1969 to 1995. The Pindari Glacier of Uttar Pradesh, the retreatment rate is maximum, that is 2840 meter. Then Choto Shingari Glacier, Boro Shingari Glacier, then Gangotri Glaciers retreated 364 meters since 1977 to 1919. Then Jemu Glacier of Sikkim. Okay, we can take the example of glacial from the western part of India, rather western Himalaya, and Sikkim is the part of eastern Himalaya. Both Himalayan zone, the glacial are retreating due to global warming. This is the total retreatment rate. This is the period of retreatment estimated and presented, and that is the rate of retreatment. So all are retreating. What is the consequence of retreatment of Himalayan glacier? Obviously, the negative consequence, there is a negative consequence, and it will changes the surface runoff pattern of the Indian River, which are fed by the Himalayan mountain system or Himalayan glaciers. And second obvious consequence is the change in the storage of fresh water in the form of ice. In the tropical and subtropical region, Himalayan Hindu Kush mountains store the fresh water from the Pleistocene era as ice. This is the huge volume of water. Ultimately, that store will destroyed in near future. Consequence of glacial melting. First is effect in EMR ratio, that is albedo, disruption in freshwater supply, river system disruption, glacial lake flood, loss of biodiversity, sediment deposition. Out of those, agricultural productivity and food security is related to that fact, and it is directly related to the changes of sea level. Uh, Glacial retreat in Hindu Kush and Himalayan region related to the albedo. We are all familiar that ice cools the planet by reflecting the EMR back to space, and albedo is the amount of solar energy reflected from the earth back to the space. And we are all familiar that the ice surface reflected more energy, more EMR than the bare or the earthen surfaces. So removing of glacier or the retreatment of glaciers that will provide, that will leads an impact on the albedo rate, rather the reflected EMR rate, rather bare surfaces absorb more EMR than the ice surface. So it will gives an impact on the terrestrial heat budget in near future. Any glacier melting, particularly the Himalayan glacier melting, is related to the albedo reduction in and it plays a very important role into the terrestrial heat budget. So, glacier melting, not only the phenomena related to the hydrosphere or water storage, but it is also related to the terrestrial temperature of the earth. Outside of the poles, the Hindu Kush and Himalayan mountain system stored maximum volume of fresh water in the form of ice or the glacier, and that glaciers, rather Hindu Kush and Himalayan glaciers, supplies the water of lots of river basin. It includes the western part of Afghanistan from the Amu Darya Basin. This is the Amu Darya Basin. In Pakistan, it is Indus Basin and the Sayak Basin. In India, we are all familiar with that. That is Ganga Basin. Also, the Brahmaputra and Ganga Basin in Bangladesh, and also the Imja Valley of Nepal and Lunana areas of Bhutan. Out of that, Irabati Basin, Mekong Basin, or even the Yolo Basin of China, uh, all are all are gets water from the either Hindu Kush or the Himalayan mountain glaciers. So, Hindu Kush and Himalayan mountain glaciers not only store the maximum volume of fresh water after pole, but also supplies the water from the Indus, Ganga, Amu Darya, and lots of river basin in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, even in Nepal and Bhutan. So, Himalayan mountain glacier and Hindu Kush mountain glaciers plays an important as well as very dominant role in the riverine system of South Asia. In short term or the initial stage of glacier melting, suppose initial melting during the period of 10 to 15 years or 10 to 30 years, the glacial melting initially release more water. Two, it will provide more water to the glacial fed river system. But in long term, the loss of glaciers is likely to significantly reduce the surface runoff. Okay, and that will leads a adverse impact on riverine system. In short time span, the glacial melting supports the river system to supply more fresh water to the river. But in the cases of long term, up to if we wait more 100 years to 200 years, then what will be the impact? Long term water volume of the river will gradually reduce and riverine system will disrupt due to glacial melting. We can take an example from Afghanistan. One of the main river of the Afghanistan is Amu Darya, and uh, studies suggest the potential decline of the Amu Darya River is 10 to 20% within the last 20 years, and that will be reduced in more than that will be reduced 10% in 2017 to 2019. So glacial melting gradually disrupted the riverine system, riverine ecology, and delta formation, so on. North Indian river are almost all river are glacial fed river, and Indus river system, and it is also the Indian river system and also the part of Pakistan, and the Ganga river system and Brahmaputra river system covered the vast area, and those river system, Indus river system, Ganga river system and Brahmaputra river system, those are purely glacial fed river system, rather Himalayan glacial fed river system will destroyed if the glacial melting continues for the long time. Chamoli disaster that is due to glacial melting rather due to melting of Nandadevi glacier. It was disaster. It hits the valley flood like a 15 atomic bombs that was so powerful and Chamoli disaster. This is a diagrammatic presentation of Chamoli disaster. This is the Ronti peak. This is the zone of glaciers, and this is the glacier ice. This is 20 meter width and 550 meter in width and 20 meter in depth. So this kind of area vacuum due to glacier melting, an obvious consequence of siding of glaciers, and ultimately it is responsible for flash flood in Chamoli district. Okay, this is the diagrammatic presentation of that. Now, what are the consequences of glacial retreat or the glacial melting, especially for the cases of Hindu Kush and Himalaya? The workshop was organized by the World Health Organization and the World Meteorological Organization. They stated that the Hindu Kush and Himalayan region, due to Hindu Kush and Himalayan region, can affect the water availability of Bhutan, India, Nepal, Pakistan, even in the Republic of China. So, water supply is very important in the cases of South Asia because South Asian main livelihood is the intensive subsistence farming that depends on the water supply and rainfall. And if the rainfall and the water supply will hampered, that will ultimately leads a negative impact in agricultural production, and that will be responsible for the crop failure, and ultimately it will be a question to the food security and water security to the millions of the people of South Asia. And another crucial uh, adverse effect is the glacial lake flood. This is very important and leads a very devastating effect on the human being, on the resource. And we can take the example of that in 2021, the Nanda Devi glacier melting and the glacier flood is very leads a very adverse effect to the people and the biodiversity. We can take the example of Bhutan, Lunana region of northwestern Bhutan. The glacial lake flood occurs in 1957, 1969, and 1994 simultaneously, and causing the extensive damage of properties, loss of lives, and lots of destruction. And even in Nepal, Digdosho glacial lakes destroyed, and that also provides a negative impact to the ecology and as well as loss of life and all these things. And even in Nepal, Bhutan, even in India, the glacial lakes flood is very frequently increasing very frequently, and those increase the trend to glacial lake flood, and that provides a negative effect on ecology and as well as responsible of loss of life and property. So, glacial lake flood is an obvious consequence of glacier melting of mountain glacier. The glacial melting increased the propensity of glacial lake outburst flood, and now it's become very common. We can take an example from Afghanistan. According to 2020's World Bank Climate Report of Afghanistan, that stated that a analysis of a satellite imagery has shown that glacial lake in the areas of the source region of Amudarya River, which is the main uh, river of the Afghanistan, grew significantly size between the 1968 to 2009, suggesting an increasing risk of glacial lake outburst flood in the years to come. So, glacial lake outburst flood, it there is an outburst flood is a hazard, and the tendencies or the potentiality of hazard increased day by day due to glacial melting in the Hindu Kush and Himalayan region. Glacial lake flood is also common environmental hazard in the Nepal. Three major river systems, rather the Koshi, Narayani and Karnali river system in Nepal, those are coming from the Tibet plateau, and more than 3600 glacial lakes in those riverine area, more than 1500 are in Tibet. And a detailed inventory has been prepared in 2020, and that informed that Nepal climatic policies that declared that 47 glacial lakes 47 glacial lakes could pose a dangerous glacial lake flood risks. So in Nepal, Bhutan and all the state in the Indian state in the northeast and northwestern mountain range all have a risk of glacial flood. Flash flood is very common fact in the foothill state of Himalayan zone due to melting of glacier. We can take the example of flash flood of Uttarakhand due to melting and retreatment of Nanda Devi Glacier. In 2021, very recently in last February, most probably 7th February, a glacial break that is Nanda Devi Glacier in the Tapovan rainy areas of Chamoli district of Uttarakhand led to a massive flash flood in Dhauli Ganga and Alokananda rivers, damaging the houses, property, and nearby Nishiganga power project. This is not the only example of flash flood in Uttarakhand. That kind of flash flood due to glacial melting is very common since 2013. Even in 2019, there was a flash flood due to melting and of the Nanda Devi Glacier. So the Nanda Devi Glacier melting is very common, and that Nanda Devi glacier melting not only responsible for the retreatment of the glacier, but it helps to it provides more pure water and exponentially increase the volume of the water in the river all of a sudden. And Nishiganga meets the Dhauliganga near the rainy, so Dhauliganga also got flooded. So this is the very common consequence of the glacial melting, and obviously it destroyed the balance on the isostatic balance in the Himalayan foothill zone. The glacier melting and its related flash flood, that is glacier lake flash flood, it provides a harmful effect on the biosphere reserve. We can take example of Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve located near the glacial peak of Nanda Devi, and it is established in 1982, and it was declared as a UNESCO Heritage Site in 1988, and now from 2005 it's a national park. In 2021, in last February, rather 7th February, due to glacial lake flash flood, the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, rather Nanda Devi National Park, was adversely affected by the flash flood and avalanches, and due to that avalanches, the Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve and its plant species and animal species adversely affected by the glacial flood. So, the glacial flood not only damage the river system or the supply of fresh waters, and also it also provides a negative impact on the biosphere reserve, also impact on the biodiversity. The glacier in the many parts of Hindu Kush and Himalayan region have undergone significant retreat in last century. The retreat of that glacier to be continuous in coming year in response to human-induced global warming, and glacial retreat or glacial melting and glacial recession with altered the hydrology and the rate of sediment transfer within this glaciated catchment, and increase the frequency of glacial lake outburst flood and the other hazard. Here I would like to mention one thing. When the glacier melt, then moraine deposit is a very obvious consequence. And this moraine deposit sometimes responsible for the glacial lake outburst as well as the avalanches. And it those facts have profound effect on the densely populated in the lower catchment of the glaciated region. Basically, monsoon is the process of seasonal transfer of heat between the tropical ocean and the land. Due to global warming, that seasonal heat transfer between the ocean surface, rather tropical ocean surface, and land masses has been disrupted due to global warming. Monsoonal circulation related to the average temperature of landmass as well as the temperature of the ocean surface. So, when due to global warming, our atmosphere gets hotter and it directly related to the increasing rate of evapotranspiration over the ocean surface, and it is able to essentially more hold more water vapor in the atmosphere, more cloud formation, and that leads more precipitation, and that's changing our monsoonal pattern. A strong and more erratic monsoonal season has faced in India, rather whole South Asia, in last 2 or 3 decades with more wet years. In future or in near future, we can face it more and more wet years, and it will damage the economy and agricultural practices, and it will increase the intensity of flood. This is the one side of monsoonal circulation affected by the global warming. Uh, that is the Southeast Asia becomes more wet and and gets more precipitation due to increasing the rate of evapotranspiration over the ocean surface. And another side of the monsoonal circulation is the percentage of aerosol is in increasing trend over the South Asian nations, and this is due to the changing condition and climatic condition in Afghanistan, rather the nations of Arabian desert. The volume of atmospheric aerosol is increasing, and we are all familiar that aerosol absorb the solar radiation, and due to absorption of solar radiation, rather solar EMR, to which less of it's reaching to the earth's surface, rather the aerosol absorb more radiation, so radiation cannot reach directly to the earth's surface, so earth's surface become cooler, so this leads to cooling of land and reducing the contrast of temperature between land and sea. Basic and foremost principle of monsoonal circulation is the temperature contrast, rather the temperature and pressure gradient in between land and sea, and that has been disrupted due to increasing amount of volume of aerosol, and that leads to cooling of land, and that destroy the atmospheric circulation, and that destroy the pattern, disrupted the pattern of monsoonal circulation. Not only this, changes the circulation in Indian subcontinent affects the air-sea interaction, which is the binding factor between the Asia and the Indian Ocean. So, climate change, rather global warming, hampers the monsoon in two ways. First part, it is up to some extent it helps to increase the volume of precipitation or the frequency and intensity of rainfall. But this rainfall is uncertain and unevenly distributed over the whole South Asian nation. And second thing is that uneven distribution of rainfall over the time across the region. This is the prime and foremost effect of climate change. And second is that the shifting of monsoonal pattern. Shifting of monsoonal pattern due to increase the volume of aerosol in atmosphere that absorb the EMR, and that leads to cooling of land. That cooling of land reduce the contrast, temperature contrast or pressure contrast in Indian Ocean and Southeast Asian. So that contrast, reduction of that contrast, temperature contrast between the sea and land, thereby weakening the atmospheric circulation and circulation of monsoon. So monsoon is adversely affected by the climate change. The extreme climatic event like heavy precipitation was the very common fact since last 2 decades in India. We can take the example from the Mumbai rainfall in 2005, 26 and 27 July. During 2005, 26 and 7 July, during within the 18 hours, 944 millimeter rain was recorded in Mumbai. That was the highest rainfall ever recorded in last centuries in India. Mumbai and the adjacent areas of Maharashtra experiences a, one of their worst flood in history. So, extreme climatic event increase day by day in South Asia. There has been noted a decrease of number of cyclone that comes from the Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea since 1970. But the intensity of the storm has increased day by day, and the damage caused by the intense cyclone has risen significantly in India and the Tibet Plateau. So, we can present details of the extreme event or due to global warming as well as man-induced climate change in South Asia. Those are the facts are the rather extreme climatic events are the heat waves. Heat waves is very common in Sri Lanka, even in the western part of India, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Intense rain and flood in Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, especially flood in Sri Lanka in 2003, and Indian flood in Surat in 2004, Barmer in Rajasthan, even in Srinagar are very common. All these are the impacts of climate change as well as the global warming. Next one is the drought. Next extreme event is the drought. Drought and the El Nino phase. India has faced El Nino phase in 1997, 1999, and 2000. Even the Pakistan adversely affected by the scarcity of rainfall due to El Nino effect. Okay, and Odisha and the part of West Bengal, even in the Madhya Pradesh, they are faced crop failure due to extreme drought and scarcity of water. And last one is the cyclone and super cyclone. Each and every years in the cyclone formation in the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea since 1997, intensity increased each and every year. Our Sundarban biodiversity zone of West Bengal are in threat due to cyclone and super cyclone. So those are the extreme climatic event due to climate change. Glacier in Hindu Kush region and Himalaya region are melting due to global warming. And due to melting of glaciers, the sea level water, the sea level is rising. And obvious consequence of sea level rise is the low-lying coastal areas like Karachi, Mumbai, Dhaka. They have more risks. They are more vulnerable. And second one is that the higher seawater level increasing the risk of flooding due to rainstorm by reducing the coastal drainage. So sea level rise also destroy the coastal drainage system or estuarine drainage system. Third one is that sea level rise uh, with the increasing of seawater level that will rise in the water table, and that will further reducing the drainage in the coastal areas. And fourth one is that the Maldives, which is very small, small nations, mainly depend on groundwater and rainwater. Those are the source of fresh water of Maldives. Both of these sources of water are vulnerable due to climate change, rather due to increase the level of seawater. With the island of Maldives being low-lying and rise of sea level is likely to force seawater into the freshwater lands. That will be the facts of saltwater intrusion in the freshwater system, and that will destroy the freshwater storage. So, sea level rise not only increase the intensity of flood in the coastal region, not only destroy the drainage pattern in coastal or estuary region, it also destroy the ecosystem, that is mangrove forest ecosystem. It will destroy the freshwater sources in the low-lying areas like Maldives, and it will submerge a vast tract of land in the low-lying areas of Bangladesh, even in the coastal zone of Mumbai and Karachi, and it will increase the intensities of cyclone and super cyclone in coastal zone. So sea level rise, another important attributes of sea level rise is that we are all familiar that the ratio between the continent and land is 3 is to 1, and that ratio will be disrupted if it continues, sea level continues to rise for a long time, and that will hampers the terrestrial ecosystem, and also it will it will also it will also hampers the lifestyle, fisheries, mangrove forest ecosystem, and biodiversity too.